am currently in a student teaching internship in a high school on the east side of Cleveland. I have come across the idea for a project to compare the literacies of my life to the literacies of my students' lives. These literacies are less of literacies revolving around the ability to read and write, but more so revolve around the ability to comprehend, interact with, and be a part of the world. A majority of the students who I teach are Black or Hispanic. And so to understand how I have developed to have my literacies within the world and to understand how my literacies compare with the literacies of my students, I decided to interview two of my 12th grade students. I asked these two students questions that revolved around getting a better understanding of the world that they grew up in and the world as they understand it today. And so, before I talk about the literacies of these students and what I came to realize as a result of talking to them, I first want to take a look at my own literacy and my own growing up into this world. I grew up on the far east side of Cleveland in the largely white suburban town of Willoughby Hills. It is here that I established my roots in the world, and it is also here that I began developing a literacy myself. As I grew up, I decided to attend high school at St. Ignatius High School, located on the side of Cleveland in Ohio City. And it is here that I continued to understand who I am and what I believe in. At Ignatius, I participated on the rowing team and developed a work ethic as well as some very strong senses of camaraderie and friendship with my teammates. I also had the chance to develop my own spirituality and grounded myself in a desire to continue to serve the world. I am undoubtedly grateful for the upbringing that I have had as well as my experience in high school, but I can't help realize that many people do not have the same ease of life and upbringing that I have experienced. As I took a look at my literacies compared to my students' literacies, I've come to realize that our worlds are very different. Even though both my students and I are human and we have the same abilities, I noticed that both my students live on the east side of downtown Cleveland, near what is known as Midtown. And what I've realized through conversation with them is that what comes with living and growing up in these areas, you're continually influenced by, as one of the students said, things from the hood. She continued to explain that what she meant by this and pointed out her consistent exposure to gangs, drugs, and alcohol. It's clear that my students come from a challenging lifestyle and way of life. A few things that were prominent in understanding the world is their feeling like the outside, or in other words, in the greater society, is like surviving. They feel like they are always trying to be better than the system of society and feel as though they are living in a world that is set up to make it harder for them to find success. This isn't to say that life isn't hard and that I don't go through my own struggles, but it just seems that the playing field is uneven for my students. This is something that I've never experienced, whether it be because of the color of my skin, how I've been raised, where I've been raised. There are a number of societal factors that go into playing why I haven't experienced this. Through the conversation that I've had with the students, I've realized that in many ways I've grown up into a very privileged life. Sure, My family's had to work very hard to get to where it is at today, but I can't help but notice that there is still a clear disparity between the life that I have been given and the reality that my students have faced all of their lives. It's clear that my students are fighting to be comfortable, that they are fighting to not feel like they have to worry about whether they will be successful or not. In some ways, I feel like I've awakened an understanding within me that has always been present, but I just haven't applied it to something in reality. That society is tailored to benefit some and put down the rest. That there's an overarching presence in society that neglects the needs of the communities and the people that my students represent. Taking the first actions in understanding the disparities that are still present in 2020 is the first step at making equality happen for everyone. Seeing the reality that my students come from and the literacies that they've developed has opened my eyes. And so I got to thinking, as I tend to do, and I realized that the situations that my students have found themselves in apply very closely to many of the great thinkers that I've studied throughout my education career. And I've realized in George Orwell's writing, the ideas of big brother and big institution that puts up certain people to put down others is present here. I've also had the opportunity recently to read Shakespeare's Hamlet, and many of the ideas that are present inside of this play can apply to this situation as well. And so I'm going to finish off this video with one of the most famous soliloquies of Shakespeare, Hamlet's "To be or not to be" speech.
To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing, end them. To die, to sleep, no more. And by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, to sleep.